Welcome back to Home Improvement Woodworking. Today I'm going to show you how to add paneling to your home to add value. I've got the front of this tub here I'm going to be adding paneling to. Now I've already taken the old tile off of the bathroom we're refreshing, and I've prepared the drywall here so the tile can be set. I've got a tile setter coming to put some quartz on the front surface here, and that paneling will butt up against that, and he's going to be tiling the back here as well. I've got another project where I'm framing a mirror. That'll be an upcoming project on our channel. Stick with me, I'll show you how it's done.
Our videos show you how to add value and character to your home.
This is the centerpiece of the room, so it really needs to visually work.
Learn how to get quality results that you'll be proud of. Welcome to Home Improvement Woodworking.
The tile installer started by putting the quartz on and then followed that by installing the tile. I really enjoy watching craftsmen at work when they're doing their trade. It's a fun thing to watch. I've now got the tile set, and what we've got to do next is prepare for the base. Now I've got a tile floor here that's a funky color, and we're going to be covering that with a glued down luxury vinyl tile, an LVT. So what they do is they etch the floor, then they put adhesive down, then they glue that tile down. So that's the next step here, but to prepare for that I have to take the baseboard off and a quarter round. I'll show you a few tricks for that. I'm also ordering some new faucet levers here because these ones, they're looking kind of cheap, so I think that'll help elevate this renovation. The paneling on the tub is going to come into this wall, which means this trim has to go into it. You could try to cut it off here and then caulk it afterwards, but that's not going to give you a good quality job. So what we're going to do is take the baseboard off. Once this is installed, we'll install the baseboard afterwards. So the trick in doing this is making sure, first of all, you've got a fresh blade, and what you want to do is separate the parts. So on a quarter round, what we'll do is put the blade down this direction, and that will separate it. On the top here, there's typically caulking on the top of the baseboard. And what we want to do is separate the caulking from the wall. So by doing that, we won't be taking a strip of the drywall, a face of the drywall with us as we pull that off. So just need to put a good sturdy putty knife in here. That helps separate the parts. Run this along the full edge. And of course, we'll have to touch up the paint once this all comes off. So the quarter round comes off the full room, the baseboard just on either side of the front of the tub here. Now, another tip for you is when you take trim off, you will inevitably have nails sticking out. So the best way to deal with that is a pair of pliers. So it's better to pull the nail out the back than it is through the front, because if you try and punch it through the front, you'll end up with wood splintering. So that'll save you some work. Baseboards can be trickier to come off because there's little gaps behind it depending on where the caulking is. So right here, I can tell it's really rubbery. So there's lots of caulking there. But as I come back this way, there's less caulking. So it's just trying to find the right balance between cutting into the drywall and following the top of the baseboard. So once you get all the way across the baseboard, it's a similar process. We'll go through and put the putty knife in here. Now you might need to tap it with a hammer to get it in there. So let me just do that. And then you can start to separate it along the surface. And keep working your way along until you can pop that out and then take the nails out. With all the trim removed, this is ready for the flooring contractor. Now I can move on to the next step, and that's designing the front of this paneling. How do I want it to look? Is it a bunch of small panels? Is it several large panels? I've got two sides here to work on. The best way to work through this is on graph paper to scale. That way you can visualize what it's going to look like. So what I'll do is pull out my graph paper and we'll get started on that. You don't need anything fancy to draw something to scale. I'm going to be using a marker on the graph paper. I typically use a pencil so I can erase it and change things, but the marker is what's going to show up so you can see it on camera. So I'm going to use a scale here where one of these squares here equals 3 inches. So what I need to do, I've got my measurements of the front tub surround and the side. I'll just start laying it out here. I'm going to draw out a couple of versions of this. So first of all, I'll just mark out this is 1 foot, 2, 3, 4 feet. So 48 inches is the first measurement. So I'm just going to draw a line. This will be the top of the panel. Now I need to go 18 down, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, and another 6 inches. So 18 inches. Now, you can use a ruler with this if you want to be more precise, but really this is just a sketching method to be able to ensure that you've got the measurements you need. So this is 27 inches. So we're just really looking for, does this look right at the scale we're seeing it? So this is the front of the tub, this is the side. Now what I'm going to do is put on 2.5 inch strips. So this is 3 inches. So at about 2.5, we'll come down here. 2.5, we'll go across here, go across here, and then down here. So you can see the panels start to develop. Do the same thing here. Okay, so the cupboard mold that I'm putting on, I'll be mitering in the corners here, and it's just going to add about 1 inch of trim on the inside. So something like that. Oops, that's a little fat. I should do the same thing here to get the visual on it, and then we can see what it looks like. Now, what I envisioned was multiple panels across these, not just a single panel. So we'll look at a couple of options. So there's one option. So I'll draw this, maybe 2 more versions. Let's see. So now that I have my dimensions, it's easy to draw this. Now on the second version here, what I want to do is put a divider in the panel. So let's see what that's going to look like. So what I need to do is figure out where the middle is. I believe that's the middle, 4 feet, yep, right there. So I'm just going to put, this is called a stile, there. And then let's draw the panel, the cupboard mold, and see what this is going to look like. So you can see the difference between those two. Now I wonder if I drew this one down here, we'll keep it exactly the same, what that's going to look like. Now another consideration in doing trim like this is there's large baseboard that's going 5.5 inches up here. So there's baseboard here and there's baseboard here. Does this look right with a equal size bottom and top, or should the bottom be a little bit taller? So we can play with that as well. Again, it's cheap to do it on a piece of paper, a lot less work. So why don't we draw one that has a larger base on it and see what that looks like. Okay, so there's option 1, option 2, option 3. I'll just quickly duplicate this. You can see how quick this is. Get that line in here. So on the bottom, instead of going 2.5 inches up, let's do 4.5. So 4.5 would be halfway up here. So that means the line on the base goes across here. So this comes down here. And what if we were to make some smaller panels as well? So I'll just draw these across here. Now you can see we're getting into a smaller, shorter panel space. So if I wanted to divide this into 3, let's just see. That's 4 there, 4 there, 4. Yeah, that's about it. So roughly, this doesn't have to be exact. We'll work it out. If this is the one we want, we'll work out the measurements after that. Okay, so let's put the covered mold in and see what this looks like. Actually, over here we probably need one as well. So we'll put one here. And then I'll quickly sketch this in. Okay, so here you can see we've got a heavier base because we have baseboard, again, that's going to be at this level. So do you think it looks better like this or like this? When I look at this, I'm thinking this looks like something that was built for a cabinet. This looks something more like a panel mold. Not a panel mold, but a panel. So I like this detail here. This is seeming kind of busy. This seems to be a good proportion across these 3 panels. This one seems too wide open. So I think what we'll do is go with this base, but we'll go with this panel. So these 3 panels in the design. So what I need to do is get my material ready. I need the base material for the back. And then what I'm going to do is layer on these stiles here so that we've got 2.5 inches for the stiles and 4 1/2 for the base. And that's the design. So this just goes to show you how you work it out on paper to scale and you get a good visual representation of what it might look like. If you try to conceptualize it, you might end up building something like this, but wanting something like this or something like this. So it's just a good way to play around with the design. I enjoy looking at historic homes because of the trim that's on them. It really adds richness and detail, and we're missing that in a lot of modern homes. So the secret to adding character and style to your home is adding moldings. I've got a sample of moldings here from my local lumberyard that I use when I'm designing things. I'll show you what I'm using on this project and show you a few others that you can use to dress up your home. The molding that we're going to use is a cupboard mold, and it looks like this. I'll show you from this end. So it's just over 1 inch wide. It's got a rounded profile here, and this is going to add all the style and detail to this panel molding. I'll show you an example of this where I've done this in other wainscoting so you can get an idea of what this is going to look like. But there are other moldings that you can use. This one's called an astragal molding. I'll just show you up close. It's fairly small and straightforward, but it's amazing what detail can be added with something like this. I'll show you another example of this in my house. This is a tapered pillar that has astragal mold applied to it. Without the molding, this would just be one flat surface, but you can see by adding the molding here how detailed this looks. It really adds depth and style to the column. On this wainscoting, I've used the same cupboard mold, and you can see by the shadow lines here, it's adding depth and richness to this wall. If you're just using flat pieces of wood, you don't get that. So a little bit of trim can go a long way. I hope those examples were helpful for you, and we've got a video coming up where we're doing a tour of all of our home where you can see every aspect of the detail we've added to it. So if you're interested in that, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell notification and you'll get notified when that video comes out. So now I'm ready to put this material together. I'm using 1/2 inch material for the base panel. I'm using 1/4 inch material to layer on top of that to give me the rails and the stiles for the paneling. And then I'm using the cupboard mold. So those are the 3 components. I've got some work to do on the table saw here, get them ready, and then we'll go to the bathroom and see how we start installing. I rip down all the various dimensions I need on a table saw, and then I use my miter saw to cross cut everything to the right size. In the meantime, the floor was all leveled with leveling compound, and then adhesive was applied and the tiles were stuck down. This really is a pretty cool technology. I'll show you how I'm going to assemble the parts here. So this 1/2 inch MDF is the panel. I've got 1/4 inch MDF here for the rails and stiles. So the rail is a horizontal piece, the stile is the vertical. And I'm just going to be screwing this on because I can hide all the screws by putting this material on here. So you can see here, there's the panel starting to form. And if I hold the panel mold on, you can see it's just adding another level of detail. The first thing I want to do is attach the panels on both sides. And then what I want to do is focus on this part here, that I get this angled miter properly so that it's going to look great. And I'll get the ends, and then we'll fill in the rest of the parts after that. Now, in addition to screwing into this, I'm going to be putting down some construction adhesive as well. This adhesive is a pretty thick construction adhesive. And that's great because I've got lots of texture here. I want to make sure it's going to grab. So I'll put this on the back and then shim it up so it's going to be level. And then we'll put some screws in. The screws have to be countersunk, and that way they won't interfere when we put the rail and stile on top. Okay, so I can stand this up here, and I'll just move it back and forth a little bit, but then what I want to do is check it with a level. So what I'm looking to do is make sure it's not tilted front or back. So I'm just putting a block of wood here, put my level on, and I can check it in a couple different spots and make sure it's exactly where I want and shim it up where I need it. So I'll countersink a screw here and then drive it in. On this side here, it wasn't running parallel to this front edge, so I've had to shim it out top and bottom. I also had to shim it out on that corner there so that it's running plumb. So now I'll put the adhesive on. The advantage of using a thick adhesive is you can build it up. So I can build up a couple spots here and it'll help hold. The screws will also help hold it on. I'm not really worried about this moving because of the adhesive and the screws, and then we can move on to the next step. You can see I've got a gap here. The key thing is that these boards aren't protruding. That's going to prevent the rails and stiles from being put on. And here I can see that set back just a little bit. So that's perfect. I'll screw this on and then we'll work on the stiles for this joint. I just got a call from the tile company and they're on their way to grout this floor. So I'll quickly take my measurements here, go out to the workshop and do my thing there. And then I'll bring you back and we'll take a look and see what the floor looks like. Measuring an angle like this is easy if you've got the right tools. So here we've got a sliding T-bevel, and what I'm doing is making sure it's flat on this surface and flat on this surface. And then you need a protractor. This is a Sawset Pro, this is a Canadian invention, and this is a single miter, and it's also got a double miter. So that's what I'm doing here. I'm cutting both pieces so they meet together. So I just line this up right here, and it tells me I've got a 21 to 22.5 degree angle that I cut in both pieces, and I get a perfect seam here. I previously ripped down a 3-inch piece. I need a 2.5-inch piece to the point of the angle. So I'll set my table saw to 22.5 degrees, line it up, and we'll make the cut. And then I can cross cut this in half at 18 inches, and that'll give me the 2 pieces I need. The tile's now grouted, and wow, does that ever look nice. Okay, it's time to put these pieces on. So these pieces are going to be difficult to line up. So what I need to do is make sure that the seam is tight, but also that the side is plumb. So if I get it too far over, it's not going to meet. If I get it over here, it does meet. But what I also want to make sure is that this is plumb. So I need to put a block here so I can put my level against something. And it needs to come this way just a little bit. Okay, so that will work. I'm going to be using 2 different adhesives for this. One is carpenter's glue, PVA glue, and that's to keep that joint as tight as possible. And then I'm using a different construction adhesive here for the rails and stiles. It's high tack, it's very thin, so I can squish it down. But once I put it in here, I just need to hold it on for about 30 seconds and it stays. So it's a great tool for this. I could use a nail gun for this. I've done that in the past, but then you end up having nail holes that you have to fill and sand. It's just a slower process. So I'll get the glue on this and get it put together. When you're doing woodworking and you clamp things tight and you got glue squeeze out, that tells you that you've got enough glue in the joint. So it's good to see, just need to wipe that off. We'll come back and sand that later. With the center stiles set, what I need to do now is measure from the end stiles here, and I want to cut these 2 pieces top and bottom exactly the same, and that way I know that this will also be plumb. Over here, I have to back cut this a little bit to get a tighter joint, but because this is below the surface of a tub, I have to caulk around everything. So around here, I'm okay with a 1/16 of an inch showing. So close in this case for me is going to count because I'm going to caulk this, this, and across the floor as well. I've got this piece back cut now, so I can take my measurements. Now I use inches everywhere I do woodworking except for trim. I find working with millimeters is much easier than trying to figure out what fraction I'm working with. So here I've got 1099 millimeters. Down here, 1099 as well. I'll take that to the saw, cut my pieces, we'll install them. So let's test the parts out. Now, the reason I cut these before installing the stiles is because I can get a nice tight joint here and here if I attach the rails, the horizontal pieces first. So that is holding itself together. So it's perfect. So all I need to do now is put the adhesive on. I've cut the other pieces for that side, and then I've got one more stile to go in here, and then we start working on the cupboard mold. So we've got the center stile here, and if you want an easy way to figure out the middle, what I've done is I've just marked the center of the stile as a marking line. And if you're working in inches, I'm just going to measure this and show you what I do. So here it's 43 1/4, so half of 43 is 21 1/2. So I'm just going to take my pencil and mark 21 1/2 here, knowing that it's not the right measurement, but it's close. Now if you measure from the other side, 21 1/2 is right there. So you just split the difference, and there's your center line. So I'm not ready to install this yet, because what I want to do is cut the cupboard mold here. I'm going to have two pieces exactly the same length, and then once I've got those, I can just move these in here, snug them up, and it'll be a perfect fit. So if you are too eager and you install this, you could put it on a slight angle or something, then you'd have two different dimensions here. So for the cupboard mold, this is where we go back to the diagram. What I'm going to do here is line this up where I need it. I'm going to measure here the distance and here the distance. This distance here I've already got from this one, and measure the distance there, and I'm going to write them on this diagram, go to the workshop, cut all the pieces, then I'm working most efficiently. I can come back and I can put it all together. To cut the trim accurately, I measure the outside edge where the point of the miter will be. Then what I do is I progressively sneak up on that cut on the miter saw. This is about learning your tool and how it works. You just take progressive cuts, and eventually you'll be able to cut right on the line. So the next step is to prime this, and I find this really fun because it transforms all this into something white. And even when you put the white paint on top of that, it just adds more. I'll give you some close-ups as I do that, but first I need to sand the corner here, just round it over a little bit, and sand the joints here just to make sure I've got a smooth transition. So I'm using what's called a high hiding primer. So it's pretty thick, and it's great for working on surfaces like this, because it's a little bit forgiving in that it's so thick that it will hide little tiny imperfections if there are any gaps between the pieces of trim and the rails and the stiles. So this goes on, then it needs to be sanded, and then 2 coats of finishing paint. So a little bit of painting involved here, and then once all that's done, it's just a matter of caulking everything to make sure that it's watertight, and we will have some paneling. There are two reasons to use a primer instead of a primer and a paint together. A good primer, when you sand it, actually comes off like a dust. So as I sand this, what I'm looking for is dust falling on the floor. That means I can cut it with the abrasive. If you've got a primer and a paint put together, it's more rubbery, so it doesn't sand like this, which won't give you the smooth look you're looking for. The other part is a primer is meant for adhering to bare surfaces. So this gives you the best adhesion compared to a primer paint combined. After sanding it, this is the point where you fix any flaws with filler, go back and sand them, and then you're ready for paint. I'm ready to put the paint on here, but before I get wet paint on here, I want to measure the angle so I can cut the baseboard to fit here. So I just need to set this, and I showed you before I was cutting a double miter, an angle on both sides. Here I've got a single miter, so if I just line it up here, I've got a 22-degree angle. I'll leave a link to the SawSet Pro in the video description if you're looking for one of these. I hope you enjoyed this project and it gives you confidence to be successful on a project like this. If you're looking for something a little more simple, our next project is framing out a mirror, and I'll teach you how to get perfect miters and using the right adhesive to be successful in the project. If you click on the bell icon and subscribe to our channel, you'll get notified every time we publish a video. Until next time, enjoy your time in the workshop.